everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, and welcome to the August 2019 digital issue of Chicago Jazz Magazine. I am pleased to be joined by the great Dee Alexander. She is here. You know, she has been named, I have to read off some of these things, the best singer by Chicago Magazine, Jazz Entertainer of the Year, Chicago Music Awards, and the Chicagoan of the Year in Jazz by the Chicago Tribune. But she's on Chicago Jazz Magazine now, so that's all that really matters. So Dee, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
This is a special edition because this is going to be kind of our Jazz Fest preview issue, which is coming out at the beginning of August. You are going to be performing on the Chicago Jazz Festival this year with a very interesting project. It's a new project that she's doing. Of course, if all of you watched the June issue of Chicago Jazz Magazine, you saw the interview I did with Jim Galleretto, who's the saxophonist, and he was talking all about the Metropolitan Jazz Octet that he had been working with for a couple of years, and then this brand new project that he connected with Dee on, which is called It's Too Hot for Words, celebrating Billie Holiday. It's the Metropolitan Jazz Octet featuring Dee Alexander. So, as we said before we got on camera, I got Jim's side of the story. So now, no, I'm just kidding. So we're going to talk all about this. And of course, we're going to delve into some of your background. I mean, you do so much stuff, we could talk for 3 hours, so we're not going to do that. But we're going to definitely, let's focus first off on this new project. So the Metropolitan Jazz Octet, new recording out on Delmark Records. You guys are at the Chicago Jazz Festival. I cannot believe what Jim told me is that you guys never performed together to begin. I mean, both of you play all over the world, right here in Chicago, and you guys connected at the Green Mill. I think it was at a Toys for Tots.
Yes.
Like fundraiser.
Yes, absolutely.
How wild is that?
I know, too wild, but you know, Chicago's a big city, but small at the same time. Yeah, he came up to me. I did the Toys for Tots, John McLean's charity. And afterwards, he came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm Jim Galleretto." I said, "Oh, I know you. I play your music all the time on my radio show. I love his music." And one thing led to another, and I started working with him and MJO, and we did a concert at Studio 5.
Yeah, so that was a couple years ago, right?
Yes, yes.
And now fast forward to today, and you guys just put out this incredible recording. I've only heard a little bit of it. It's just coming out. But talk a little bit about, I guess let's talk a little bit about, I mean, Billie Holiday must have influenced you extremely.
Oh, my God. Amazing, amazing. I have to thank my mother for that, and I always like to encourage parents to play your music for your children because they are listening. As I was, my mother always played Billie, Sarah, Nina, Ella. And Billie was always her voice was so haunting to me, and my mother actually told me that as a child, and I don't recall this, I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. She said I came into the kitchen in my onesie saying, "Mommy, who is that lady crying about her man?" You know, because she played her music, you know, fine and mellow.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and I would listen to this as a child. I didn't understand, of course, the gist of all of that, but just loving the sound of her voice, and it just captured me from the very beginning. So when Jim approached me about doing this project, I was, I jumped at it because, plus we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of her death this particular year. So we actually got together, and myself, Jim Cornegay, Bob Sutter, and Jim Galleretto, we got together and collaborated on which songs we would do. I already had some favorites, and I thought it would be a good idea. Of course, we had to do some all-time favorites like "Tain't Nobody's Business If I Do" and "Strange Fruit," which, oh God.
Yeah.
But I thought that it would be a great idea to do some of the more obscure songs that the listener may not be familiar
well,
with.
that's the thing, because there's such a repertoire
Oh, my
there.
God,
But I think that if you're a jazz fan, and unless you go deep into the jazz thing, you know a handful of Billie Holiday famous tunes that you hear on the stations and all that stuff, but there's such a repertoire, right?
Such a repertoire. I mean, songs that she was swinging, of course, the ballads, the blues, you know, the downtrodden. She touched on all levels of emotion. And I pretty much wanted to kind of keep things up, you know, like on a...
Yeah, you could drive it down real fast.
Right. Things are looking up, you know. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the names of one of the tunes. So it's a great... There are 10 songs, and I think as far as continuity, it's a great selection of songs.
And it's an interesting group, too. I mean, it's
oh,
an
my God,
octet.
yes. It's an octet. And they are... I cannot tell you how pleased I am to work with these gentlemen. They're great musicians, great friends. They're all comedians.
Of course.
And they're all just great guys.
Well, and then on this recording, too, they also added in strings, right, to some of the tracks.
Ah, yes, I was about to levitate.
Right?
Yes.
So, talking about Billie Holiday, and since you just happen to be a vocalist, this is I never have vocalists on. Well, every once in a while I had Tammy McCann on, but I always have instrumentalists. So I'm curious. So when you talk about Billie Holiday, to me, Billie Holiday, when you compare her to Ella, when you compare her to Betty Carter, when you compare her to anybody, she has got such a unique style.
Yes.
Outside of just the vocal timbre, but her phrasing. And as a vocalist, I mean, what did you take from Billie? Because it's completely different, I think. I mean, I hear you swinging, I hear you doing everything. She doesn't swing the same way as, like, some of the regular people that we would hear singing. So what is it about Billie that makes it happen like that?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, my aim was to reinterpret. It was about interpretation and breathing a different kind of life into Billie's music, and hoping that her spirit is happy with what we've done. And I think that she was, because I just, in my heart of hearts, and I just felt that she is very happy with what we're doing with her music. Also introducing it to a different audience, a younger audience. But what I take from Billie is just a story. Being a storyteller. And that's the thing with vocalists. We all want to hear a story, and we want, and I think the best vocalists, the greatest vocalists, are the ones that have really lived a life. They felt joy, pain, sorrow, you name it. They felt it all. They've covered the waterfront. And that way they're able to convey that story and pull you in to the story as well.
When you're talking about telling a story, and we're talking about Billie Holiday, but then if we talk about other vocalists too, but Billie Holiday in particular, since we're talking about her, you're right, because you can feel things weighing on her, and then when you read about what she was going through when she was recording these things, you really feel that. And I don't know if you get that from a lot of vocalists, but really her, and especially she was like, one of the first ones, right? I mean, she was very early. So when you were listening to her originally, maybe not when you were one, but when you were listening to her, when you were, getting into the jazz scene and learning about jazz, is that somebody you gravitated to? It was just longing, and you
Absolutely. I still listen to her. I'm still discovering other songs that I have not heard from her, heard recordings of. And I always feel it's like, it hits me right here in my heart, because as far as Billie or other vocalists that really touch me, vocalists that have really lived are the vocalists that really move and touch me.
Yeah.
Some vocalists go through the motions of, but those that have really lived and walked that path, you can tell. You can tell. It's nothing that you can cover, and it's nothing that you can pretend or.
You can't learn it.
No, you can't learn it. Absolutely not. So, Billie, quintessential.
Yeah. So this recording's out on Delmark. You're going to be performing at the Chicago Jazz Festival.
Yes.
And, of course, all the information's at delmark.com and dealexander.net to find out where else she's playing with this group in particular. But let's talk a little bit before we get into some of the different groups you're in. I'm curious, since we're going down this road with vocalists,
my goodness.
and we're talking a little bit about your background. I mean, did you start... You're listening, obviously, growing up listening to jazz, because your mom was playing it, right?
Absolutely. My mother, that was my first experience with jazz, was through the music my mother played. And then, of course, when I was throughout grammar school and high school, I always wanted to try to sing like Chaka Khan and Gladys Knight. Didn't work. But anyway, I love it.
I'm sure you can still sing.
No. I mean, I love Gladys Knight and I love Chaka Khan, of course. And that's, I cut my eye teeth on that music as well. But I have to tell you, I would be remiss without mentioning my mentor, who was a gentleman by the name of Light Henry Huff, who I worked with in the 80s and 90s. He's passed on now. But he was one of my greatest inspirations in that he just told me to just, first of all, tell a story, to be totally uninhibited. Don't be concerned about what people think, and just develop your own voice. So those are the things that I still do to this very day. It's something that I'll do till my last day. He wrote original material, which inspired and encouraged me also as well to write my own music and lyrics. And that also comes through experiences and living,
Yeah.
you know. So that's something that I still do to this very day. He was a member of I know you're going to bring this up, the AACM.
I was going to ask you. I thought that's maybe where you met him, right? Or is
Well,
that...
yeah, I met him and the whole group of the AAC: Ed Wilkerson, Mawata Bowden, Douglas Ewart, Ernest Dawkins. I met all of these guys, you know, and they're like my big brothers, you know, and they are all such an inspiration to me, just in terms of being creative and just being strong and not being afraid, you know.
You know, I think that every time I talk to people that either work with the AACM, have been, you know, like Ernest, right? I'm talking to Ernest. But the thing that I get from it, outside of all the different, you know, there's so many different elements in the AACM, but the one main thing, and I think this is very important for a lot of music students and everybody, is that they're not so necessarily worried about restrictions. Meaning, they're not what that, you know, you don't have to worry about playing parallel fifths or not. Right. I mean, that's the simplistic version, but I'm just a drummer. That's what I can think about. But you know what I'm saying. And you brought up a great point when you were talking about Light Henry Huff, is that he said, don't worry about restrictions. Don't worry about what other people are thinking about you. But it's even more than that, right? It's like, don't even worry about what all these other musicians are doing if you feel like you should go somewhere else. That, to me, is what really that organization pushes forward, right?
Pushes forward and beyond.
Yeah.
We're doing a concert. Actually, we're going to be at Pitchfork this Friday at 1 o'clock. And we had a rehearsal yesterday.
I saw that, and I was like, they're going to be at Pitchfork Fest?
We're going to be
wild.
We're going to be at Pitchfork, and we only have 40 minutes, and we're doing one song. And believe me, that one song could go 40 minutes and beyond. And it's one of Ernest Dawkins' compositions that he wrote for Joseph Jarman. And even at the rehearsal, the music, it's just so riveting in terms of the way he directs us and the way that everyone plays. It's just, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people think, oh, that avant-garde music, oh, God, it's just a lot of noise. It really isn't. There is direction within what some people may say chaos, but there is direction within the middle of all of that music. And I'm just very fortunate to have the experience of working with the AACM and then working with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, and then I'm working with the Metropolitan Jazz Octet, and then I have my own trio, and then I have the Evolution Ensemble, and then I'm the thing that I'm doing with John McLean, and it's just a wonderful marriage just within the music. There are no limits.
Yeah, I think with the AACM and with the improvised music side of the whole thing, I'm in agreement, because if you listen to people that don't have the background and don't really understand what's happening, they're saying they're going to play avant-garde or free jazz. Yeah, it probably sounds like nonsense, because they don't really know what they're doing. But when you get into the AACM, when you get into the talking to Paul Wertico, right? It was like spontaneous composition. I mean, that makes total sense. And talking to Ernest Dawkins, I mean, there's pieces, it's written out, and there's a flow, and everybody communally knows where it's going, and you're able to add to it. And that's why I think it's so interesting with you, because you can do that, but you can free up your mind enough to do that, and then you can also, boom, now you're playing with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, now you're playing in your own thing, and you never get confused.
And the key element, I tell you, the key element of it all is listening. Listening is not a lost art. And that, to me, is the foundation of it all. I just sit and I listen. I remember when I first started working with the group, I was what on earth do they want me to do? What on earth am I going to be doing? I just sat quietly and I listened to what was going on around me. Then I was able to include myself into that. So you have to listen, as opposed to, well, what do you want me to do now? Well, what's next? Just be quiet and listen, and you'll figure it out.
Right. It's like that's really kind of like what creativity's supposed to do, right?
Exactly.
What a thought. Now, I'm curious. So we're talking about that, and you're working in the AACM. I mean, you're working. You're really starting to expand things and all that stuff. But you have a really hard sense of swing. I mean, you're swinging when you get down to it, man. When you're with your trio or the Chicago Jazz Orchestra or any of these other things, Who are some of your influences with that? Because I mean, you must have studied something at some point that like to get the phrasing and stuff, or was it just listening? Actually, I don't know.
You know what? As a vocalist, I have to say, of course, I've been influenced by Ella and Sarah and Nina and Dinah. But some of my greater influences have been musicians. Just listening to, working with horn players and working with phenomenal drummers, of course.
Of course. Thank you.
The timekeepers.
That's it. She's the best interview I've ever had.
Ernie Adams, I mean,
Yeah.
bar none.
Right.
I mean, he's Charles Heath. I
Yep.
mean, these guys are just phenomenal. Robert Shy. I used
Yeah.
to work with Kenny Prince and Robert Shy back in the day at the other place, which was on 75th and King Drive. That was an experience in itself, working with Kenny Prince. He was another kind of cantankerous kind of guy, but he was just a genius. I worked with Ken Chaney,
Yeah.
and with Vern Allison and, Frank Russell and these guys. I had to learn how to swing because I learned it from the best.
Were you just like playing regular gigs, like coming up, you're just playing every
my
gig you
God.
possibly could?
Back in, believe it or not, I've raised two sons. I had a day job that I retired from.
Congratulations. Yeah.
With benefits.
Oh.
And I was doing all of this and doing a 5-nighter, like at the back room and some people may not remember the back room or
Back
the
room.
Jazz Bulls.
Yep.
And there was Chic Rick's. And I was working consistently while holding down a job. Now, if I actually thought, how on earth did I do that? I couldn't give you an answer. It was God because I think about it and I just get exhausted. But I paid my dues.
Yeah.
I mean, that was.
How important do you think, because I know a lot of musicians watch this and see all of the stuff you do, and you just walk out on stage at Prickster Pavilion, everybody claps and Dee kills it and leaves, and everybody's like, oh, look at that, she's great.
You're so kind.
But I mean, doing you have, as a musician, especially as a jazz musician, to get everything under control, you have to do it, right? I mean, you have to pay your dues. You have
do.
to play and learn tunes.
Yes, you have to learn tunes, but you also have to get your rest. Rest is key. You have to take care of yourself. You have to remain healthy, and all of that. All of that is key because if you're not healthy, everything goes kaputs, and then.
Especially as a vocalist.
As a
too.
vocalist,
Yeah.
I remember there was one concert that we had at the. I want to say it was a tribute to Ella. It was at Pritzker Pavilion with the Chicago Jazz Orchestra, and it was myself, Spider Saloff, and Frida Lee, and my voice had just gone kaputs. And at the rehearsal, I couldn't sing. I had no voice, no highs, nothing. And I went into the ladies' room and I was crying. I was like, oh my God, I don't have my voice. I don't know what's going on. So I went to the doctor and found out I had a walking pneumonia. Little did I know. No wonder I didn't have a voice. So I was sick, but the show had to go on. I still did the show, but I just kind of stayed within the parameters of what I was working with at the time with my voice vocally. And people that know me, like Neil Tesser, say, hey, what's going on? Kiddo, what's going on with your voice? I'm like, I have walking pneumonia. I'm sick, And they gave me an antibiotic, and I got over that. But the show must go on.
Yeah.
My sons call me the Beast.
Oh, yeah?
I don't want to be a beast.
You just power right through it?
Just go right through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is important, especially for a vocalist. Now, and I mean, you do a lot of traveling, too. I was looking at your website, and I know you've been over to Europe a million times, but you actually had a trip to South Africa, right?
I went to South Africa.
That was a couple years ago?
Yes, the Joy of Jazz Festival. Oh, my God, that was...
I mean, that's a lot of traveling, but the experience must have been incredible.
It was so incredible. It was a long way to go, but it was worth it. It was I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I keep in contact with quite a few people there via Facebook and email. Miss Alexander, when are you coming back? You must come back. You must. So hopefully I'll be going back there really soon. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit. So you're coming up on the scene and all this, and I'm always curious when I'm talking to somebody that's done as much stuff as you. But you're playing gigs, you're raising a family, you're getting no sleep, one gig after another, one gig after another. You're probably excited when you play like the Jazz Showcase as a local person at that point and doing that kind of stuff. Was there a certain gig or a certain experience or a certain moment that you were like, okay, this is like, now I'm getting to the next level where this is feeling really good?
It's so interesting you should ask me that. When I did the tribute to Nina Simone and Dinah Washington, which was via the Jazz Institute of Chicago, and I have to thank Lauren Deutsch for that, commissioned by them. And I did the Sirens of Song, the tribute to Nina and Dinah, with Miguel de la Serna as my musical director. Couldn't do it without him. And, you know, it was just, the funniest thing is that originally we were scheduled in July. I want to say it was July 24th. And there was this biblical storm that came in. I had on this red dress. I was ready to, you know, and I had the microphone and I sang one song, and Dana Calderon, you know, she's a stage manager, she went, because it was like darkness and lightning coming in, and we're a Pritzker Pavilion, which is all metal, and you got these saxophone players holding these. That's all we needed was an incident of an act of God. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but it just rained, and we got rained out. And we had the soul children with us, you know, the choir, and it was just, and everybody was so, I was dying inside, but I managed, I just sat there like, because all the kids were there, and Miguel was like, oh, you know, and I just had to keep this smile on my face, like, oh, everything is okay, but I'm really dying inside. So anyway, we could not do the concert, obviously, because of the weather. But I got a phone call from Helen Doria. Remember Helen Doria? She called me the next day, and she said, Dee, we really love you, and we'd like to know if you would, we want you to do this concert. And I'm thinking, okay, I would love to do it. I'm thinking next year. She said, well, no, we have 3 or 4 dates open this year. And I'm like, oh my God. So the date that I opted for was September 11th.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and the same thing happened to Stevie Wonder. Stevie had a concert at Northerly Island that also got stormed out. And so his concert was also rescheduled on September 11th.
Man.
But it was, I think Howard Reich, he gave me the most wonderful review, and there were, I mean, as far as I could see out there were people.
Yeah.
My mom was there, and the word that, and I have to use this word, it was a magical night. It really, really was.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like catapulted me into another level of my career. It was wonderful.
You know, you brought up the Jazz Institute, and I know you've done a lot of stuff with the Jazz Institute, so we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about it. But the Jazz Institute, they do so much for local musicians especially, right, to get the showcasing out there and all that stuff. And you've done some educational things for them. You've done a lot of that stuff. So why don't you talk a little bit about the Jazz Institute? I mean, you've done some things for them, but I think more importantly, what they do for the music community in general, right?
What they do for the musical community, and I think also the plus to me is what they're doing to bring up the youth.
Yep.
I mean, it's wonderful what they're doing with the young people. All these wonderful musicians that are coming up now as a result of coming through the program at the Jazz Institute. My good friend Diane Chandler Marshall, over education, she's a doll. Now we have Heather there, and they're just doing a great job. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, no, they're pushing it all forward. So
pushing it all forward.
And that must have been like a Made in Chicago event, right? I mean, wasn't that the Nina Simone tribute? So that was part of that. That's why that stuff happened.
And at the time, we were able to go to Poland. We also did the Made in Chicago. It's not in existence anymore, unfortunately now, but under the helm of Lauren Deutsch, we went over there and we did it over there as well, and it was so well received.
Yeah. So that was that one moment where all of a sudden you felt like, okay, boom. And then things really started popping.
Things started popping. I started getting, you know, and it's interesting. People ask me, well, how do you get your gigs? It's like, I didn't do anything. People started contacting me, which was a blessing, through my website or, you know, whatever. I'm not hard to find. And I would get emails. We would like to invite you to this. We would like to invite you to that. We would like to invite you to this or that. And that's how I did all the traveling. Yeah.
And it just starts going, and then your name gets going and everything else. I find it amazing that you were able to do all that traveling and everything and still have a day gig.
I found it amazing, too.
So let's talk about some of your own music here. So you've got the Evolution Ensemble.
Yes.
And that's still in existence. How did you just decide you're playing in all these different groups, doing all these different things? You wanted to have your own voice finally, and it was just you?
Well, the Evolution Ensemble came into existence again by way of Lauren Deutsch, and she just asked me, what do you want to do? And my mentor, I have to get back to my mentor, Light Henry Huff, I was in a group with him called Breath, which consisted of myself, Avriel Ra, phenomenal drummer, Yosef Ben Israel on bass, Light Henry Huff, he played every horn from the soprano, that high C, to the Barry bass clarinet. He was a multi-instrumentalist. So he wrote all this beautiful music. And when he died, I had access to all of his music. And his mother said to me, Dee, I know that my son really loved you. I give you permission to do whatever you need to do to get his music out there. So I got his music copywritten and published. And I tell you, no sooner than the ink dried, all of these wonderful things started happening for me.
Really?
Yes. Oh, so many wonderful things. And he had sarcoidosis, which is one of those autoimmune disorders that affects the lungs, the small bones of the hands and feet. And he was a reedist, so it affected his lungs, So it was just amazing. All of these wonderful things started happening for me. He told me he knew that he wasn't going to live to be an old man. And I'm like, oh, nobody knows that. He says, no, I'm not going to live to be an old man. But he pretty much eulogized himself the last time I saw him, sitting on a sofa, don't cry for me when I'm gone, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, God.
You're like, what's going on?
Right. But anyway, there's a song that he wrote called You and I, and there's a line in it that is so special to me. It says, speak to God on my behalf.
Wow.
And I believe that he is working on the other side. As a matter of fact, I wrote a song for him called See You on the Other Side. And he's working and speaking to God on all our behalf.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah. Well, and the fact that you're putting it out there, you're helping to prolong and build his legacy, right? So that's what the Evolution Ensemble is? It's
that's
based
how
off
we
of?
started.
Yeah.
We did a concert at Columbus Park at the Refectory, I believe it was called. And he wrote songs on a harp. He was a harpist as well. Not the classical, but the small troubadour harp.
Okay.
And so we had a harpist, and we had Ernie and James Sanders on violin, Tamika Reed on. That's how we started off, with Tamika playing the cello but holding down the bass lines on cello.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that's how we started, and we all wore white, and it was such a beautiful evening. And several people shared with me that on several of the songs that we sang, the lightning bugs behind us started flickering. It was,
wow.
No one videotaped it. I was like, oh my God, But yeah, it was very, very special. That's how the Evolution Ensemble, and then it evolved. We added a bassist, we added Junius Paul, and then we also added Scott Hesse. And then we went on to do several tributes, if you will. Jimi Hendrix, James Brown. And when I first brought it to them, I said, hey, let's do this thing. Let's do this music of Jimi Hendrix. They looked at me like I was nuts.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, you guys, trust me. Man, did that take us around the world and back. They loved it. Around the world and back. And Terry Collier, we touched on his music as well. And so then I thought, okay, we've done enough tributes. Let's just start writing some of our own musics, and we're doing that as well. So
yeah.
Well,
and you're so versatile, because I've seen you do the Chicago Jazz Orchestra. You played at the Deer Park Jazz Fest the one year with Eric Schneider, straight ahead stuff, everything else. I know I've heard you play R&B and all the other things. But is that because that's the music you grew up on, listening to jazz originally? Your mom was playing it, but you must have just grown up just loving music in general.
Music,
right?
Period. As long as it's good.
Yeah.
I love it all.
Yeah. Now you've got a radio show.
I have a radio show.
And I'm going to let you. So is it the WFMT Radio Network?
It's the WFMT Jazz Network.
Jazz Network. Okay.
And I have to thank my good friend, Mr. Neil Tesser, because he is the reason why I am doing that show. And I studied radio and television at Columbia College back in 19... So
2015.
And so, but as fate would have it, I had my kids, so I kind of pushed that to the side. I had to raise my kids and all that. And I want to say about 4 years ago, Neil called me. He says, "Hey, how'd you like to do a radio show?" I was like, "Yeah, I would love to." So I went out to WFMT and I interviewed with them, and I did like a mock show. And the rest is history. And it's beautiful. It's syndicated.
It's in like 40 markets.
Oh my God!
Or
Yes,
more than that, maybe.
More than that. I mean, China.
Oh, really? So it's like they're getting it really out there.
They're getting it out there. And I get emails all the time. People liking when I'm playing because, there's so much music out here. So much, and I have kind of a wide palette when it comes to music, even though, they say, "Okay, Miss Alexander, we want to keep it a little bit more mainstream." So I'm like, mainstream, what does that mean?
Well, that's always my point, and it's interesting that you're here because I think of it this way too. I have this conversation with most of the artists that I sit down and interview. It's like, maybe 30 years ago when there was a 50s radio station and a jazz radio station and a big band radio station and a polka station or whatever. Those are the genres. But nowadays, there's not, I can't sit in the jazz realm alone and say, that's jazz and that's not.
Exactly.
I mean, give me a break. That's
exactly.
this person, that's this person, because everybody's blending together. So it's going to be difficult for you to program something that is jazz when it's just Latin jazz. I mean, who knows?
There's
right?
so much.
Yeah.
It's so much. And as far as I'm concerned, sky's the limit. But I do have to follow certain guidelines because I don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Well, yeah.
So yeah, but I'm like today, I did a show, I played, some art ensemble. And then I went right into Cecile McLaurin Salvant. And then, Ben Webster. And then I played, it's just so much, a myriad of so much great music out there. And people like it. I get nice responses from people.
Well, and I also think too, because look at all the styles we just talked about during this interview. But if somebody puts a recording on, whether it's you performing with this group, that group, whatever, that's Dee Alexander. They're not saying that's not jazz. No, it's Dee Alexander. That's Micaiah McCraven. That's so and so.
Exactly.
I just think that so many people have been exposed to so much stuff now that it's so hard to pigeonhole things. So for you, programming is one thing, but then also for you as an artist, is that anything that you ever think about? Or now that you're touring under your own name, you're going around, you don't really sit and think, okay, what am I going to play that's straight ahead? No, you're playing, this is what I'm doing because this is my program.
I don't think, I shouldn't say I don't think, but I don't think about that,
Right.
I really don't. And I go based on how I feel, and what moves me. So, and it's been great, man.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Now, you've got another band that you didn't even bring up, the project that you're doing with John McLean, which is fairly new.
Yes.
You guys were just at the showcase a couple of weeks ago.
We were just at the showcase a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be there again in September. Yeah, John and I, it's funny because he asked me to do, I was working at Catch 35 with Eric Hochberg and Steve Million, and he stopped in one day. And he just asked me, "Hey, I'm doing this charity, Toys for Tots. Would you be interested in doing it?" I said, "Oh, of course, anything for the kids. Guitar Madness, with
Right. That's right.
crazy guitars." And it was so much fun. And that was that. And that's when I met Jim. And then a couple of months later, we were at a fundraiser for Paul Marinaro. And Judith Stein asked John if he would she does this Tuesday cafe thing at Cafe Logan.
Yep.
So she asked John if he would be interested in doing something there. And if it were okay, if they had me as a vocalist. So, and we did this thing, and it was myself, John, and Patrick Mulcahy. And it was beautiful. Yeah. It was so beautiful. And John is a great composer, arranger, a lyricist even now. So now we're writing, I have ideas of songs that we bounced off of each other. So now we're creating this book of music, and hopefully everyone will like it. I think it's going to be great.
That's interesting because, and I think, as a lyricist, you tell me, because I think that's one of the toughest things to do, aside from playing and everything else, writing lyrics, telling a story. I mean, I could tell
Yeah.
a story. Listen
Yeah.
to me just babble on, right? But it makes no sense if I'm singing it. I mean, so, and it's definitely not in an 8-bar phrase, I can tell you that. So, I mean, that's got to be really difficult. But you're writing music, you're writing lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, how difficult is that for you? I mean, is it just come straight to you, or?
Sometimes it does, and John he told this story at one of the performances and had everyone laughing. Things come to me in dreams, and I keep my trusty iPhone right there with voice memos is my friend. So I wake up in the middle of the night, and I've got so many recordings on there that I listen back to, and I laugh at myself because I'm like, my voice is half,
Right, yeah.
And when I listen to it, I'm like, what on earth was I doing? And then after I listen to it, I got my idea. I'm glad I put it down, because if I don't put it down, it's gone.
Yeah.
So I use that as a reference. And he, being the virtuoso that he is, he does all the charts, it's like, and I give him my ideas. And the thing that I like about working with John is that I think we're taking each other out of our own comfort zones.
Yeah.
So it's really good. He's making me think differently, and I think I'm kind of influencing him to think differently as well. And it's just been great.
Well, and that's one of those things that if you find that right person to collaborate with, they should pull you
Exactly.
out, right?
Exactly.
And that allows you to expand. That's like the AACM, what we're talking
Yeah.
about. It all comes full circle, right? Because
Yes.
they pull you out of your comfort zone. Then you got to figure out what to do over there.
And then the key is keeping an open mind.
Yeah.
Not stagnating yourself and just, I don't want to do that. I don't know. At least consider some of the ideas that are projected your way. So
Right.
I always try to keep an open mind.
Well, I mean,
I have to.
everybody has to these days.
Oh,
I
my
think,
God, yes, I
You know what I
know.
love about that story too is Judith Stein. Judith Stein is like the greatest, man.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
see her at every festival. She's
Yes.
going faster than anybody else. She's
Yes.
moving around. She's connecting people. Everything's happening.
She's a great friend. She
is.
really
and,
is.
And the fact that she got you guys together and you guys did that, and now that's growing. I mean, she's done that with so many different people, and the
Yes,
stuff she
she
does with the
has.
Hyde Park Jazz
Yes.
Society and all that is incredible. All right, so Dee, I really appreciate you
Oh,
coming
thank
in.
you so much.
This has
Oh,
been
it's
a ton
over
of fun.
already? How much? I thought we had more time.
I'm trying
Wait a
not to go
minute.
down the wormholes, otherwise we're going to talk forever. But
Okay.
so everybody needs to check out Dee's brand new project, the Metropolitan Jazz Octet.
Yes.
I have to make sure I say that correct. The Metropolitan Jazz Octet. And the new recording, it's Too Hot for Words, celebrating Billie Holiday, featuring Dee Alexander. That's on Delmark.
Yes.
And, of course, you're going to be at the Chicago Jazz Festival. We'll link all that information up below this
Perfect.
video because I'm not quite sure what time you're doing it yet. So,
I can tell you.
well, thank goodness.
We're performing October 30th. October. Oh, I can tell you.
boy.
Edit. No. We're performing August 30th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the Von Freeman stage.
Yeah, Von Freeman. And that's going to be one of the first. Is that one of the maybe the second live performance of that group? Because you just did something, didn't you?
It'll be the third one. Oh, yeah. We just did a wonderful concert at Studio 5
Right.
again.
Yep.
This time doing the music of the album. And
Yeah.
it was sold out, packed to the rafters, and phenomenal.
Unbelievable. So this is going to be incredible at the Chicago Jazz Festival.
Yes.
Of course, all the information on Dee at dealexander.net. We've covered a lot of ground here. I'm
Yes, we
excited.
have.
This was great.
Thank you. When can I come back?
Well, we'll put it down. No, we have to have you come back because you're apparently going to have a new project every 2 months here.
Oh,
all of a
gosh.
sudden. It's unbelievable how much stuff you're doing. But of course, everybody check Dee out at the Chicago Jazz Festival on Delmark Records. Pick up the new recording. And of course, we will be down at the Chicago Jazz Festival previewing, doing interviews, and dropping new podcasts throughout the entire month of August and into September, October, and thereon. So always refer back to ChicagoJazzMagazine.com, ChicagoJazz.com. And until next month, we appreciate you watching, and we will see you somewhere out on the scene.